Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, and when I'm not walking the earth because it turns out hell is really discriminatory about who gets into it, I'm here at the Wolfula reviewing movies. Well, Dejuary March is on, and speaking of March, it looks like it could actually go into March. What a surprise. Last time I covered George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, the film that jump-started the zombie craze. Make sure to watch that vid if you haven't yet, because now we're moving on to the sequel released a full decade later, 1978's Dawn of the Dead. Now, Night of the Living Dead may have been a hit when it released, but again, it instantaneously fell into the public domain as soon as it released. So Romero, his cast, and crew barely saw any of the cash the film made from all the royalty-free exhibitions, and the film, despite its success, was a pretty bleak, violent movie with Romero earning a reputation as a maverick filmmaker who didn't compromise. So, unfortunately, Romero slummed it for a few years after Night of the Living Dead released. His second film, a romantic comedy called There's Always Vanilla, was a flop. The next film, Season of the Witch, no relation to Halloween 3, didn't fare well either. The Crazies and Martin were well received, but were not successful financially. Romero was even forced during this time to make a documentary in 1974 about O.J. Simpson called The Juice is Loose, back when O.J. was still a football player instead of a murderer. Eventually, though, the dead came calling back to Romero, and I don't mean O.J. Simpson's dead ex-wife. Romero paid a visit to the Monroeville Mall near Pittsburgh, an early shopping mall managed by one of his friends, and Romero was informed during the visit that the mall could endure bombings or other disasters, a safe place to survive nuclear holocaust. So Romero had the concept of applying the idea to his own brand of apocalypse, zombies. Romero and his producer, Richard Rubenstein, more on this asshole later, couldn't attract any American investors despite Night of the Living Dead's success because the last time Romero made a zombie movie, nobody who spent money on it made money back. Luckily, famed Italian filmmaker Dario Argento was a fan of Night of the Living Dead and secured the financial side of Romero's sequel in exchange for the rights to distribute the film in international territories. And so, with a $1.5 million budget, Romero returned to Monroeville to shoot his next zombie epic titled Dawn of the Dead. But does this shambling zombie still have meat on its bones? Let's find out with my review of Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead begins in media res with the zombie outbreak already sweeping the nation. Millions have died and are now walking around making more dead bodies that will eventually also walk around ad infinitum.
They eat their victims. You understand that, Mr. Berman? That's what keeps them going.
Romero, like the TV control room director he plays in the film, presents us a clever, efficient way to establish the apocalypse by giving us a couple talking heads arguing on television about what's happening and how to handle the situation. Romero had huge ideas for this movie initially, but this is 1978 on a relatively small budget, so he saves money just by building up the massive scale of the zombie plague in the audience's heads. There's a sense of frenzied panic in front of the camera and behind the scenes in this TV studio. The government is waging a losing war against the zombie threat, and much like in the original movie's house, everybody has their own ideas about how to handle the situation, and nobody can take a moment to cooperate through it all.
This situation must be controlled before it's too late. They are multiplying too rapidly.
Again, Romero builds an atmosphere of conflict before we even get to meet our first zombie, so the tension can gradually build and the sense of looming menace surrounding the zombies is given more ample time to grow.
You're not running a talk show here, Mr. Berman. You can forget pitching an audience the moral bullshit they want to hear.
The musical score that Italian prog rock band Goblin, a frequent Argento collaborator, performed for this film also adds to the feeling of high-stakes pressure of the proceedings, a sense of claustrophobia in the studio that forces female lead Francine, played by Galen Ross, to leave her job with her boyfriend Steven, played by David Enge, and the score seamlessly leads into the other plot thread, where the action finally begins.
Our responsibility is finished.
Martial law has been declared in the USA, and anybody defying it gets a nasty knock on their door from Uncle Sam. A public housing project opts to not surrender their dead for destruction by the government, so a SWAT team descends upon the building and are met with opposition, and the first kill of the film isn't even from a zombie. Within the opening 10 minutes of the film, Romero goes out of his way to firmly establish not only ideological conflict during a zombie apocalypse, but also the unnecessary violence that would erupt between people. There were certain unintended social statements made in Night of the Living Dead, like casting a former university professor as the lead, but matured, Romero tackles social issues far more head-on in Dawn. Some of the commentary isn't the most subtle, though.
Low-life bastards blow all their low-life little Puerto Rican and asses right off.
Clumsy dialogue aside, I do appreciate Romero using his films to make broader statements tied to the themes of his stories, using his platform to call attention to certain issues, so it isn't just seeing dudes' heads get blown up. But man, that is cool. Let's see that again. Holy shit, fuck yeah, again. The housing project scene is a frenzy, and it's hard to follow exactly what's going on. It perfectly captures the chaos surrounding these kinds of situations, where some take advantage of the frenzy, snap decisions are made, and people die. Essentially, though, Peter, played by Ken Faree of Kenan and Kel fame, is revealed to have killed a deranged SWAT member named Wooly, and Roger, played by Scott Reiniger, suggests that the two desert their units and rendezvous with his helicopter pilot pal.
A friend of mine's got this helicopter. He asked me to come with him.
Whereas the original Night of the Living Dead had constant conflict between the survivors, an amputee Padre sums up this film scenario simply.
We must stop the killing, or we lose the war.
There's no hope of surviving a threat if we end up making each other a threat. So Peter and Roger join up with Stephen and Fran, and the quartet quest for a place where they can survive in peace. From their helicopter, they witness what could have very likely been the rural home seen in Night of the Living Dead, along with a legion of shambling creatures. Oh, and zombies, too. After running into a ridiculous number of the undead at an isolated fueling station, including the zombie from the movie's poster and a shaggy-haired ghoul who just wanted a little off the top, things look really bad on the ground. Peter even kills some hyperactive zombie kids that he probably didn't even realize were zombies. It's clear that the gang needs a better place to hide, somewhere secure, somewhere with plenty of supplies, and somewhere that's a symbol of American capitalism, a shopping mall.
What are they doing? Why did they come here?
Memory of what they used to do. This was an important place in their lives.
Really? I'd hate to see the zombies that decided to go to McDonald's. George Romero films tend to have a lot of social commentary / satire, but it usually is made abundantly clear with no room for subtlety or ambiguity. It's kind of charming, and it's also proof that Romero definitely didn't intend any of the statements people thought were made in Night of the Living Dead, because he didn't have a dude in the movie blatantly spell them out for the audience. The shopping mall is prime real estate, but it's already occupied by undead tenants spending their afterlives window shopping. So after Roger and Peter do some really fun reconnaissance, the group, hiding out in the mall's back corridors, figures they can barricade the mall and eventually mop the floor with the remaining zombies inside. What could go wrong?
We've got everything we need right here.
From here, Dawn of the Dead's pace picks up, and it becomes far more of an action-packed spectacle that also serves as a grand showcase of makeup effects artistry courtesy of Tom Savini, known under his stage name Frank Zappa. This was one of Savini's first films and his second collaboration with Romero. Savini had a much bigger budget on Dawn to work with and a larger playground to push the boundaries of what you could show in a movie. Admittedly, Savini was faced with a big challenge. What would Romero's zombies look like in full color? And it turns out they're just kinda gray with some colors still around their eyes and lips. It's not exactly cutting edge or convincing, but this was the first zombie film at this kind of scale and in color, and there are a lot of zombies on screen.
And since we haven't touched upon our nuclear resources, why don't we drop bombs in all the big cities?
What makes the zombies work in the movie individually are the performances of the volunteer players who are game for anything if it meant being a zombie in a Romero film. The zombies in Dawn of the Dead end up being memorable because they all stand out as the people they were. You can make a zombie look as gnarly as possible and have it be scary and great, but I'll still never forget the Hare Krishna zombie just because he's a Hare Krishna zombie.
We got this, man. We got this by the ass.
In some ways, the violence against the zombies in the movie ends up feeling more shocking because they just look like people. And where the makeup on the zombies might be lacking, the actual blood and gore of the film isn't. Dawn of the Dead may have been technically outclassed effects-wise in the years since, but this movie really just went for things in the gore department that hadn't been done before to such a degree or volume in American films. I mean, this flick came out the same year as Halloween, and there you maybe see some blood on Jamie Lee Curtis's arm. Even the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974 had relatively little blood or violence on screen. Dawn of the Dead was next-level stuff, and Savini used it as an ample opportunity to ply his trade. In a lot of ways, Dawn of the Dead would inform Savini's work on Friday the 13th and the slasher films to come in the 80s, where there are just these great isolated gore gags that are gratuitous but fun. Honestly, there's something about the violence of this film that still kind of repels me a bit, and I think it has to do with how unnaturally oversaturated all the bright red blood is. It's like Hammer Studios blood. There's just something off-putting about it that heightens the gore. You're just seeing stuff come out of people that doesn't look like it even belongs in them to begin with. Eventually, the gang conquers the mall, wiping out the zombie menace but at great cost. While getting this situation by the ass, Roger gets his ass bit and slowly succumbs to his wounds.
I'm gonna try not to come back. I'm gonna try.
Despite this, things are pretty good for a while, and for like more than 20 minutes, the movie just becomes a few people hanging out in a mall, and you know, that's not a bad thing. Kevin Smith made a 90-minute movie that was just that. The film honestly offers a kind of wish fulfillment for me, where I just have an entire mall all to myself. I can take candy without paying, play arcade games non-stop, try on hats, play with the guns that are most certainly still being sold at malls today. The possibilities are just endless.
What do you think? Come on, Joe.
Dawn of the Dead is a nice movie to just watch idly, chilling out and letting your mind wander. Admittedly, the film isn't trying to glamorize living in a mall, though. Over time, the characters start to feel hollow, surrounded by the trappings of commercialism, manufactured products, a manufactured lifestyle, isolated from any hope of a normal life.
What have we done to ourselves?
It's made more tragic by the fact that Fran is revealed to be pregnant with Stephen's child. Nothing ever comes of it within the events of the film, but it's a great way to visually depict the passage of time while also adding some more dramatic weight between the characters.
We can't, Stephen, not now. Be real.
The main quartet of actors in Dawn of the Dead do get upstaged by their zombified co-stars, but they're all well-defined characters that are in turn well-performed to keep interest even when zombies aren't around. Ken Foree's stand out as the stoic, resolutely calm Peter.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
Scott Reiniger, Prince of Gore, is great as Roger, a dude who's cocky even in the face of certain death.
We whipped them and we got it all!
David Emge plays a pretty thankless role as Stephen, who is a mild-mannered dude who seeks the same kinship that Peter and Roger have while alienating Fran.
Do you know how many times we would have to land for fuel on our way up north? Those things out there are everywhere.
Galen Ross as Francine is another thankless role, but even though she doesn't get into much action, she's a huge improvement over Barbara. Never once screaming in this movie, having far more dimension as a character who longs for her old life and wishes to play an active role in this especially male-dominated world.
If anything happens to you, we have to be able to fly out of here.
She's right, man.
Moving on to the big spoilers now. Well, big shocker. Roger dies, but he doesn't stay dead for long, and he's honestly one of the few zombies that actually looks really good in this movie. The emotional impact would have been reduced if he just looked like a gray dude with no other changes. Roger is given a tasteful burial beneath the garden of a Pittsburgh mall. God, I hope they bury me the same way. Roger's death isn't the only snag, though. The mall becomes a big target for some bikers, the murdery kind of bikers, led by Savini himself, and while the siege on the mall is the climactic point of the film, the bleakest moment, it doesn't really feel that way. The film becomes a montage of wacky zombie antics, another opportunity for Savini to showcase his gore skills while the bikers basically troll the zombies, even throwing pies in their faces. It might seem inappropriate to have this kind of humor tonally, but it's in line with who these bikers are. They're people living on the edge with no sense of reverence. They're just looking for some thrills and see this apocalypse as an opportunity to live large instead of taking the dangers of the zombies seriously. Instead of taking an opportunity to escape himself, Stephen vainly decides to try to fight off the bikers and maintain control of the mall, and it, of course, leads to his downfall as a consumer consumed. And while David Emge doesn't stand out much as a human, he does make for a damn good zombie. He's the highlight of this film zombie acting-wise.
He's dead.
I heard his gun. Maybe he's all right.
Peter and Fran are left with narrow options, but Peter decides to hole himself away in a room while Fran flees to the roof. Now, the film was originally scripted to have a very bleak ending like Night of the Living Dead, where Peter shoots himself in the head, and Fran sticks her head into the helicopter blades, and the whole buildup of these suicides are kept in the film, but at the very last second, Romero opted for an upbeat ending where Peter fights the zombies off to A-Team sounding-ass music. It's mood whiplash for sure, especially when Peter and Fran aren't very optimistic about their survival.
How much fuel do we have?
Not much.
All right.
Followed soon after by upbeat stock music that's juxtaposed with the B-roll of the zombies back in control of them all. I'd be lying if I said this ending doesn't always give me chills, though. Dawn of the Dead, due to its graphic violence, received an X rating initially, but Romero refused to accept it and just released the film unrated in the USA in 1979, which meant it had limited advertising, but it still managed to be a hit, earning more than its predecessor at the box office. Before Dawn of the Dead released in the States, though, it was released in a different form in Europe to great success half a year earlier. There are actually 3 official cuts of the movie available on home video, the standard version running at 127 minutes, a rougher extended cut that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival that runs at 139 minutes. The extended version is sometimes called the director's cut, but the standard US theatrical release is Romero's actual preferred version. The extended cut is just before he had more time to polish the film. Finally, there's the European version of Dawn of the Dead, known under the title Zombie, which is the most different from the US version. It cuts the movie down to just under 2 hours, so it has a faster pace and removes most of the humor. It also has more music by Goblin, removing all of the stock music additions. If you don't like the humorous aspects or satirical commentary of the Romero cut, you'll probably prefer Argento's version, and the popularity of Zombie in Italy led to a far-reaching series of very confusingly titled quasi-official sequels that I'll probably dissect at a later date if there's interest. Honestly though, I'd recommend watching the standard version of Dawn of the Dead first, though, to properly appreciate the alternate versions. Romero shot scenes with a lot of different angles, giving himself options during editing, and you can see a lot of the different shot choices made between the edits, being able to see scenes from literally different perspectives. Here's the thing, though. How do you watch the original Dawn of the Dead if you don't already own a copy? It's out of print in the USA on home video, with Blu-ray copies going for hundreds on eBay. I had to pay $70 for my copy of the Ultimate Edition DVD. The movie isn't streaming anywhere. Why is that? Believe it or not, because of petty greed. Richard Rubenstein, the film's producer, spent $6 million of his own money in the late 2000s to finance a 3D conversion of the original Dawn of the Dead. The big problem for him, though, was no distributor was willing to purchase the rights to a 3D Dawn of the Dead for such a steep asking price. Might as well spend that money making a new horror film they can fully own. So, out of spite, Rubenstein has tried to make up for his loss by raising the asking price for Dawn of the Dead's home video rights in the USA to an exorbitant sum, so no home video label is willing to purchase it. So we all gotta suffer because a greedy old man made a poor decision. What else is new? Your best option to have an official release of the original Dawn of the Dead is to import the new 4K release from Second Sight Films. 4K Blu-rays are region-free, so if you somehow got a PS5 in 2020, the film will play on it the best it's ever looked. Still, this option will obviously cost a lot, and it's a pretty big hurdle to see this one movie. What Richard Rubenstein is doing is not only actively erasing a part of horror history, but also depriving the film from a whole generation. Richard Rubenstein should be ashamed of himself, and I hope instead of walking the earth when he dies, he just goes straight to hell. So, Dawn of the Dead is a classic zombie film, just like Night of the Living Dead. The first film was the spark, and the sequel was the fire. In a lot of ways, though, Dawn has aged worse than Night. There are a lot of aspects of the film that are lacking in polish. The zombies in color honestly look a bit jank, but despite the obvious flaws, Dawn of the Dead is my personal favorite zombie film, and every horror fan should watch it. At the same time, though, it's not easy to get a hold of the film legally. Its producer actively doesn't want you to see this movie. I don't normally condone piracy, but hey, I own a legal copy. Do what you gotta do. I give Dawn of the Dead a Peter out of Keenan and Kel Dad. Honestly, if Dawn of the Dead came out today, it would take place in an Amazon warehouse.
Attention all shoppers, we have a special treat for you.
If you liked this video, like it, and if you loved it, journey further into the Wolfula by clicking the subscribe and bell buttons to find out when all of my latest videos and streams go live. This video was brought to you by my kind supporters on Patreon, whose names are scrolling by. Support the channel today on Patreon and get access to bonus movie and TV commentaries, audiobooks, comic readings, film live streams, and credits at the end of videos. Finally, I'd like to give a very special thanks to my true Wolfulite supporters on Patreon and my YouTube channel memberships for their pledges. Their support is greatly appreciated and helps the channel and my dark influence continue to grow. Thank you all once more from the bottom of my evil heart for your help. Alrighty, Dr. Wolfula signing out. See you all next time at the Wolfula.